The sky was soft pink as dawn broke over Eastwood, a small town where life moved slow and people smiled too much to hide the cracks beneath. On a quiet street lined with old oak trees, Maya Johnson walked beside her son, Elijah, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. She wore a faded blue uniform from the hospital where she worked the night shift. Her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. But her hand held his tightly warm, strong, full of love. Elijah was 10, small for his age, but bright like morning light. He carried a backpack twice his size, covered in science stickers, planets, rockets, a tiny dinosaur wearing glasses. He wanted to be a scientist, not a football player, not a rapper, not what people always assumed. A scientist. He said it with pride, like it was already true. But lately, that pride had dimmed. He didn't talk much after school anymore. No jokes, no loud stories about his day, just silence. And when he did speak, it was careful, like he was afraid of being too loud, too much, too black. One night, as Maya helped him with homework, he looked up and said, "Mom, why does Mr. Dale always send Jamal to the office when he laughs? But when Tyler knocks over a chair and yells, Mr. Dale says, 'Boys will be boys.'" Maya froze. Her heart dropped. She asked the teacher, polite, calm, "Can you explain the difference in how you discipline the boys?" The teacher smiled. "Jamal is energetic. We just keep him in check." Maya wrote a note, then another. Then she went to the principal. Principal Harris listened barely. He nodded, scribbled something on a pad, and said, "We treat all kids the same here, Mrs. Johnson. No favoritism." But Maya knew better. She saw how Elijah was watched more closely at recess, how his questions were called disruptive, how he was told to calm down when he raised his hand too fast, how white kids got second chances, third chances. Elijah got warnings. So this morning wasn't just another school day. This morning, Maya walked into Eastwood Elementary with a folder in her hand. Inside, dates, names, notes from other black parents, a voice recording of Elijah crying after a teacher called his project too loud and made him redo it in silence. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of being polite while her son's spirit was slowly crushed. She was there to demand change. Marcus, her husband, was supposed to meet her. He was a quiet man, a construction worker, a veteran who believed in rules and fairness. He always said, "We play by the book. That's how we win." But the book never prepared them for this. When Marcus arrived, boots heavy on the linoleum, he saw Maya standing in the hallway outside the principal's office. Her back was straight, but her hands trembled. Inside, Principal Harris sat like a judge, arms crossed, face cold. "You're making a scene," he said. Maya's voice didn't shake. "I'm not making a scene. I'm protecting my child." Marcus stepped in. "We're not here to fight. We're here to fix things. Our son loves this school. But he comes home feeling like he's doing something wrong, just for being himself." Harris didn't answer. He just picked up the phone, and in that moment, the air changed. Something shifted like the calm before a storm. Maya didn't know it yet, but that phone call would echo across the town, the state, the country, because what happened next wasn't just unfair, it was unforgettable, and the world was about to see exactly what it looks like. When love is mistaken for threat, when a mother's courage is seen as a crime, and when a simple walk to school turns into a fight for dignity. The principal's office was quiet, too quiet. No music, no laughter, no warmth, just the hum of a broken AC and the ticking of a clock on the wall, like time itself was judging them. The walls were cream-colored, clean, perfect, like nothing messy, nothing real was ever allowed inside. A photo of Principal Harris, with his smiling white family, sat on the desk. A plaque read, "Discipline builds character." It felt like a warning. Maya sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Marcus stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He didn't say much, but his presence was strong, like a wall, protecting his family. Elijah waited outside, sitting on a small bench, hugging his knees, staring at the floor. Harris didn't look at the folder Maya had placed on his desk. He didn't touch it. He didn't even glance at the notes, the dates, the names of other parents who had seen the same thing, the same unfair looks, the same harsh words, the same punishments for small things white kids did without consequence. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mrs. Johnson, accusations like this, they're serious. They create tension. We don't need that here." Maya's heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. "This isn't an accusation, Principal Harris. This is a fact. My son is being treated differently. Other parents have said the same. Why won't you listen?" Harris frowned. "We treat every child fairly. Equal rules for everyone. That's how we maintain order." "Equal rules?" Maya asked, her voice rising just a little. Then why is Elijah told to lower his voice when he answers a question, but Tyler screams across the room and gets a high five? Why is Jamal sent to the office for laughing, but no one says a word when Jake knocks over a chair and laughs louder? Harris didn't answer. He just stared. Marcus stepped forward. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for fair treatment. Our son wants to learn. He loves school, but every day he comes home feeling like he's too much, too loud, too emotional, too black. That's not discipline. That's bias." The room felt smaller, hotter. Harris shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened. "You're making this personal. That's not helpful." "It is personal," Maya said, her eyes filling. "He's my son. He's 10 years old. He shouldn't have to walk into a classroom feeling like he has to shrink himself just to be accepted." For a second, something flickered in Harris's face, maybe guilt, maybe fear, but it disappeared fast. Then, without a word, he reached for the phone on his desk. Maya's breath caught. "Who are you calling?" No answer. He pressed a button. The intercom crackled. "Security to the main office," he said, voice cold. "We have a situation." Maya stood up. "We are not a situation. We are parents. We are here to talk." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he whispered, but calm didn't matter now. In less than a minute, 2 police officers walked down the hallway, both white, both with hands near their belts. One young, one older, with tired eyes and a face that looked like it had seen too much. "What's going on?" the older officer asked. Harris pointed at Maya and Marcus. "They're being disruptive, refusing to leave." I felt unsafe. Maya couldn't breathe. Unsafe. She was in a blazer and hospital scrubs. Marcus was in a work uniform, his hard hat still in his hand. "We're not disrupting anything," Marcus said, hands open. "We're asking for fairness, for our child." The younger officer looked at Maya. She was holding Elijah's school photo, the one where he smiled with all his teeth, so proud in his science fair medal. The older officer glanced at Harris. "Are they threatening you?" "No," Harris said. "But they're not leaving. That's because we haven't finished talking." Maya said, tears now falling. "You're ending this by calling the police on parents, because we want our son to be treated with respect." The silence that followed was heavy, like the air itself was ashamed, and down the hall, Elijah looked up. He saw the uniforms. He saw his mother crying. He saw his father standing tall, like a soldier, but this time, not for a country for him, and in that moment, a truth settled deep in the halls of Eastwood Elementary. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing a black parent can do is ask for justice. The hallway stretched long and bright, with shiny floors and colorful student drawings pinned to the walls, rainbows, family portraits, essays titled "What I Want to Be." One of them was Elijah's. "I want to be a scientist because I love finding answers. I ask questions to learn, not to cause trouble." It hung right outside his classroom. But now, that same hallway felt like a courtroom with no judge, no jury, just silence and stares. Maya and Marcus were being escorted out not by choice, not by peace, but by two police officers walking slowly. Behind them, hands still near their belts, like they were dealing with criminals instead of parents. A crowd had gathered. Students peeked out from classrooms, eyes wide. Some teachers stood frozen in doorways, mouths half open. A little girl dropped her crayons. A boy whispered, "Is that Elijah's mom?" Elijah saw it all. He stood by his locker, backpack in hand, heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. His mom looked back at him just once. Her eyes were wet, but strong. She mouthed 3 words, "I love you." He didn't move. He couldn't. His feet felt glued to the floor. His throat closed up. All he could think was, "This is my fault. I should have just stayed quiet. I should have just been smaller." They walked past the front office, past the secretary who looked down at her desk, past the school counselor who turned away. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. No one said, "Wait, this isn't right." Only one person did. Ms. Carter, the 4th grade aide, stood in the doorway of room 7. She was black, older, with silver hair and kind eyes. She pulled out her phone and pressed record. She didn't say a word, just filmed. The camera caught everything: the slow walk, Maya's trembling hands, Marcus's straight back, the way the officers stayed close, like they expected a fight that never came. It caught Principal Harris watching from his office window, his face pale, his hands gripping the blinds, and it caught Elijah Small, silent, broken. Outside, the air was cool, but the shame burned hot. A few parents had arrived too. Pick up their kids. They stopped when they saw the scene. One woman gasped. Another pulled her child closer. "Why are the police here?" a man asked. "They're kicking out Elijah's parents," someone whispered, "because they said the school is racist." The word spread fast. By the time Maya and Marcus reached the sidewalk, people were already pulling out their phones. Someone shouted, "That's not right." Another yelled, "Leave them alone." But the officers didn't stop. They didn't apologize. They just said, "You need to leave school property," in flat voices, like they'd done this before. Maya turned one last time. "We're not leaving because we're guilty," she said, voice shaking but loud. "We're leaving because you're afraid of the truth." Then, she took Marcus's hand. They walked away not in anger, but in dignity. Behind them, the school stood quiet. But inside, something had cracked. Because what happened wasn't just about one family. It was about every black child who's been told to calm down for being excited. Every parent who's been treated like a threat for asking questions. Every time fear was chosen over fairness. And now, the whole world might see it, because Ms. Carter uploaded the video that night. No filter, no edit, just truth. It started with 10 views, then 100, then 1,000. By morning, it had 50,000. And in that video, you could hear a single line from Maya, soft, broken, powerful. "We just wanted our son to feel safe at school." That sentence echoed across towns, across states, across hearts. Because sometimes, the loudest cry for justice is a whisper from a mother walking away, hand in hand with her husband, knowing she did the right thing even when the world called it a crime. By sunrise the next day, Eastwood wasn't quiet anymore. The video had exploded. Principal calls cops on black parents for filing racism complaint. The word spread like wildfire across phones, news feeds, and morning coffee tables. Shared by teachers, reposted by activists, picked up by local news, then national. Within hours, a quiet town in the middle of nowhere was suddenly at the center of a storm. Outside Eastwood Elementary, the schoolyard was no longer for children's laughter. It was filled with voices angry, heartbroken, demanding. Protesters stood shoulder to shoulder, Some held signs. Our children are not a threat. Others read, protect kids, not egos. A group of students, mostly black and brown, wore matching t-shirts that said, I asked a question. Was I too loud? A local pastor stood on a folding chair and spoke into a megaphone. This isn't about one school. This is about every time a black family was told to be quiet, to wait, to be respectful while their pain was ignored. Inside the school, windows were closed, blinds drawn. Teachers moved quietly between classrooms. Students whispered. Some cried. Others just stared at their desks, wondering if their parents might be next. And Principal Harris, he sat alone in his office. The TV in the corner played a news clip, his face frozen on screen. The video of Maya and Marcus being let out, playing in slow motion. The reporter's voice was calm but sharp. Parents say they were treated like criminals for seeking justice. The school has not responded. Harris didn't move. His coffee sat cold. His hands trembled. He kept replaying it the way Maya looked at him, not with hate, but with disappointment. The way Elijah stood frozen, like a child seeing the world break for the first time. The way the officer said, we have a situation, as if love and courage were dangers to be removed. He thought about his own daughter, safe at college, texting him every morning, love you, Dad. He imagined her, years ago, coming home upset because a teacher treated her unfairly. He would have stormed the school. He would have demanded answers. So why, when Maya did the same for her son, did he see her as a problem? The truth hit him like a punch to the chest. Because she was black, and he had been trained by silence, by habit, by a system he never questioned to fear her. Not her words, not her pain, her dot. He leaned forward, head in his hands. Outside, the crowd grew louder. Then came the knock. The school board president stood in the doorway, Ms. Diane Cole, a black woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of this fight. We need to talk, she said. No anger, no yelling, just calm, heavy truth. Harris nodded. They walked to the empty auditorium. No cameras, no crowd, just two people and a broken moment. You called the police on parents, Diane said. Parents who came with paperwork, with love, with hope. Not weapons, not threats, hope. And you treated them like intruders. Harris looked down. I thought I was protecting the school. From what? She asked. From accountability, from change. He had no answer. Diane leaned forward. This isn't just about you, Robert. It's about all of us who stay silent when we see wrong. But today, the silence is gone. And she was right. Because miles away, Maya sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by other parents, black, brown, white, young, old. They brought notebooks, phone recordings, stories of their children being punished for speaking up, for being emotional, for being different. Marcus stood in the corner, listening, nodding. Maya looked around the room. We're not here to destroy, she said softly. We're here to build. A school where our kids don't have to hide who they are. And as the sun set over Eastwood, one thing was clear. The storm wasn't coming. It had already arrived, and nothing would ever be quiet again. 3 days after the protest, the sky over Eastwood turned gray, heavy with the kind of clouds that hang low before a storm breaks. But this time, the storm wasn't outside. It was inside the school auditorium, where every seat was filled. Every face turned toward the stage. Cameras rolled. Reporters stood at the back. Parents, teachers, students, and even neighbors from nearby towns had come to see what would happen. Principal Harris walked to the podium alone. No guards. No police. No excuses. He looked older than he had just a week ago. His tie was straight, his hands shook, and his eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. He didn't clear his throat. He just began. I was wrong. The words dropped like stones into still water. A silence fell so deep, you could hear a pen drop. I was wrong, he said again, voice breaking. Not just a little wrong. I was deeply, painfully wrong. I failed Maya and Marcus Johnson. I failed their son, Elijah. I failed every black student in this school who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unwelcome. He paused, swallowed hard. I called the police on parents who came with love in their hearts and a request for fairness in their hands. I called them a threat because I was afraid, not of them, but of the truth they brought. A few people in the audience wiped their eyes. I told myself I was protecting the school, Harris continued. But I wasn't protecting anything. I was protecting my comfort, my pride, my silence. He looked up, scanning the room. I have spent my life believing I was a good man, a fair man, but being silent when black children are treated unfairly. That isn't fairness. That is complicity. Whispers spread. A mother hugged her son. A teacher nodded slowly. Harris took a deep breath. When Maya handed me that folder, I didn't see a mother trying to protect her child. I saw a challenge, and instead of listening, I reached for power. I called the police because I didn't want to face what she was saying, and in doing so, I proved her point. The room stayed still. I cannot change what I did, he said, voice trembling, but I can take responsibility. So today, I am stepping down as principal of Eastwood Elementary. Not because I'm being forced, but because real change starts with accountability. Gasps filled the room. He wasn't just apologizing, he was surrendering his position. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, looking directly at Maya, who sat in the front row, holding Marcus's hand. But I hope one day Elijah can walk into a school where no one fears his voice, where his joy is celebrated, not punished. And I hope he knows that one day, an old man with a heavy heart finally listened. Tears rolled down Maya's face. Not tears of anger, not of pain, tears of power, because, in that moment, she saw something rare. A man who had been part of the problem, choosing to become part of the solution. After the speech, no one clapped at first. Then, slowly, a single hand began to clap. It was Elijah. He stood up, small but strong, and clapped for the man who had wronged his family, but who had also, finally, spoken the truth. One by one, others joined. Teachers, parents, even some of the officers who had been there that day. But the loudest sound wasn't applause. It was the silence that came after deep, healing, full of possibility. Because, for the first time in East history, the truth hadn't been buried. It had been spoken, and the town, broken, but breathing, began to believe that maybe things could change. Not because a principal stepped down, but because a mother refused to stay quiet, and her son, he was still dreaming of stars, of science, of answers, and now, nothing, not fear, not pride, not silence, could make him stop asking questions. A month later, spring arrived early in Eastwood. The air smelled like fresh rain and blooming flowers. But the most beautiful sight wasn't nature, it was the transformation happening at Eastwood Elementary. Where shame once lived, hope was now growing. In the far corner of the schoolyard, students and parents worked side by side, digging in the dirt, planting seeds, building something new. This wasn't just any garden. This was Maya's idea. We need something beautiful, she had said at the first community meeting. Something that shows growth, that shows care, that shows we can build instead of break. They called it the Unity Garden. Children of all colors knelt in the soil, their small hands planting sunflowers, lavender, and marigolds. A wooden sign read, "Truth grows here." Next to it, a small tree was planted. Elijah had chosen it himself. A dogwood, because it blooms even after the coldest winter. Elijah stood by his tree, smiling for the first time in months. His backpack was still covered in science stickers, but now he walked taller. Like the world had finally made space for him. Maya watched from a few feet away, tears in her eyes but joy in her heart. Marcus stood beside her, arm around her shoulder, watching their son laugh with new friends. "It's really happening," Marcus whispered. Maya nodded. "It is." A new principal had arrived, Dr. Lena Cruz, a warm Latina woman with kind eyes and a fierce commitment to justice. She had spent her first week meeting with every parent, every teacher, every student. No police, no fear, just listening. She had also started something called Courage Circles, weekly meetings where students could talk about their experiences, their feelings, their dreams. No judgment, no punishment, just understanding and the racism complaints. They were taken seriously now, investigated, addressed, not buried. Maya had started a group called Parents for Equity. They met every Thursday evening in the library, now filled with light instead of shadows. Other parents joined: Black, white, Latino, Asian. They shared stories, resources, and hope. One evening, as the sun painted the sky orange and pink, Maya found herself standing in the garden, watching children play where pain once lived. A little girl ran up to her, white, maybe 7 years old, holding a handful of lavender. "For you," the girl said with a gap-toothed smile. "It smells like happiness." Maya knelt down and hugged her. "Thank you, sweetheart." As she stood up, she saw Elijah helping an older boy plant a sunflower. No harsh words, no unfair treatment, just teamwork. Dr. Cruz walked over, clipboard in hand, smiling. "How's it feeling?" she asked Maya. "Like healing," Maya said. "Like we're finally planting seeds for a better future." Dr. Cruz nodded. "That's exactly what this is." Later that evening, as families began to leave, Marcus put his arm around Maya as they watched Elijah water his tree. "You were so brave," Marcus said softly. Maya looked at her son, then at the garden, then at the school, where change was finally taking root. "I wasn't brave," she whispered. "I was just a mother who couldn't stay silent." But that's exactly what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. And in that garden, surrounded by flowers and children's laughter, Maya knew something for certain. The storm had passed, and in its place, something beautiful was growing. One seed at a time, one truth at a time, one child at a time. 6 months later, Eastwood Elementary looked like a different place. The hallways buzzed with laughter, not fear. The walls were covered with student work-hard essays, science projects, all displayed with equal pride. In the cafeteria, children of all backgrounds sat together, sharing lunches and stories. But the most beautiful change was in room 7, where Elijah sat at his desk, raising his hand eagerly. "Mr. Thompson," he said loudly, "what if we mixed baking soda with vinegar and dish soap? Would it explode bigger?" The new teacher, Mr. Thompson, smiled. "Great question, Elijah. Let's find out." No warnings, no calm down, just encouragement. Elijah beamed outside the classroom window. Maya watched through the observation glass during her volunteer hour. Her hospital scrubs were clean, her hair pulled back, but her eyes sparkled with pride. Marcus stood beside her, both of them seeing their son thrive in a way they had almost given up hoping for. "He's glowing," Marcus whispered. Maya nodded, tears threatening to fall. "He's finally free to just be a kid." The transformation hadn't been easy. There were meetings, trainings, hard conversations. Some teachers left, some parents transferred their children, but many stayed and many more joined. The Unity Garden had become a symbol of hope. Students tended to it daily, learning about growth, patience, and care. A small plaque now hung on the tree Elijah had planted, in memory of the day we chose love over fear. Maya's Parents for Equity group had grown into a district-wide movement. They worked with schools across the county, sharing resources, training teachers, and making sure no parent ever felt alone in fighting for their child. Dr. Cruz had become More than a principal, Shay was a leader, a healer, a bridge builder. She started monthly community dinners where families could share meals and stories without agendas or fear. And Principal Harris, he hadn't disappeared. He had taken a position in the district office, working specifically on equity training for all school leaders. He spoke at conferences, sharing his story, the story of a man who had to fall before he could rise. "I spent years thinking I was protecting my school," he would say. "But I was really protecting my own comfort. True protection means making sure every child feels safe to dream." Elijah had become a symbol too not of pain, but of possibility. He was featured in the local newspaper, on the school website, inspiring other children to speak up, to ask questions, to be brave. At night, he still talked about being a scientist. But now, he also talked about being a leader, someone who would make sure no child ever felt small for being themselves. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Elijah looked up from his homework. "Mom," he said, "do you think other kids feel like I used to feel?" Maya's heart ached, but she smiled. "I think some do. But now, because of you, they won't have to feel that way alone." Elijah nodded seriously. "Good, because everyone should get to be loud and proud and smart." Marcus chuckled. "That's my boy." As they finished dinner and cleaned up together, Maya looked around her home full of love, full of hope, full of a future that had been worth fighting for. She thought about that day, months ago, when she had walked into the principal's office with a folder and a dream. She had been tired, scared, but determined, and she had changed everything. Not just for Elijah, but for every child who would walk those halls after him. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a parent can do isn't protect their child from the world, it's change the world so their child can be free. And in Eastwood, that freedom was growing strong, beautiful, and unstoppable, just like the tree in the garden that Elijah visited every day, watching it grow taller, stronger, reaching toward the sun, reaching toward tomorrow.